Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is compete. Let's take a look at some of the definitions or ways that we use this verb. One way you're likely to hear the verb compete used is to mean to try to gain or win something by defeating others who are trying to do the same. So they or these other individuals are trying to gain or win. You'll commonly hear this verb used in sports, but it's not limited to sports. We will talk about people competing in business, so in their line of work. There are musical competitions, so again, people competing to be named the best performer with a particular instrument or with singing, etc. A second way to use the verb compete is to refer to anyone or any group of people who are taking part in some sort of contest. So here, with compete, you might think of a drawing. A prize might be given away. They're not really engaged in a physical activity to try and gain, but they are participating against others. You should know that compete is a regular verb. To make the progressive tense, we're going to drop the final E before adding ing to form competing. The past tense and participle forms of this verb are made by just adding the letter D, since this verb already ends in an E. The base verb, compete, ends in a T sound. So our past tense ending is going to make an id sound. We're going to have an extra syllable. Competed, competed. Now let's take a moment to look at some phrasal verbs with compete. There are 4 that we're going to look at with a couple meanings for one of them. But what you're going to see is that all of these generally connect back to the main definitions we looked at moments ago. The first phrasal verb we'll look at is compete against. The meaning here is someone is putting forth effort or work in an attempt to do something successfully. Again, this doesn't have to be used or limited to sports or athletic competitions. And you can see this in my example sentence. You are competing against hundreds of other applicants for this job. So someone is putting forth an effort in writing a really good resume, writing a really good cover letter, and maybe eventually they'll be putting forth effort into giving a really good interview in hopes that they are successful in being offered a particular position. A second way to use compete against is to mean to struggle against something. So an example of this could be teachers compete against cell phones for their students' attention. Okay? So many teachers I know sometimes feel like it's a struggle to get people to listen or engage in class or an activity because there is this other thing that many students prefer to look at or pay attention to. So this is the struggle that many teachers feel or face. The next phrasal verb we'll look at is compete for. You're going to see here the definition or the meaning is very similar to the first definition of compete against. It's to put forth an effort in an attempt to gain someone or something. So when we used compete against, what came after it was sort of the competition, the other individuals, right? Here, we're going to use a noun or noun phrase to describe what is going to be gained. So an example of this: contestants are competing for the $1 million prize. Right? That's what they hope to gain by being successful. They are competing against one another. The next phrasal verb, compete in, again means to participate in a competition. An example of this could be 100 runners competed in this race. So they participated. The last phrasal verb we'll look at is compete with. It means to put forth effort against someone or something. Here's an example. She competed with some of the greatest athletes in the world. So again, it's sort of noting all the participants or all the competitors involved in the activity or the action. Now we're going to look at how we form more information questions or WH questions. We've been practicing this all week in a few different verb tenses. Today we're going to focus on the simple future using will. Now, what you're going to notice here about our structure is that it's going to be the same no matter what our subject is. And so to make a more information question using will, we want to start with our question word. This could be like words like when, where, why, what. Then after that, we're going to use our modal will, and then we'll have our subject. And after that comes the base verb and maybe some other words that help give the question more context or more meaning. So you're welcome to pause the video here if you would like, and you can make different combinations of questions. I'll do a couple just to illustrate how this can work. Right? I could ask the question, I could start down here with the word what, use my modal will, then pick a subject. What will you study? Okay, that's the verb I picked. What will you study? I'm looking for a topic, a subject to answer that. And again, I call these more information questions because if someone just said yes or no to these, that wouldn't make any sense. And again, we can make all sorts of different questions using this same structure. And we're going to continue practicing that using our verb of the day, compete. Okay? If you want to ask a question about a location, a place, you should use the question word where. And again, let's look at our structure here. You want to follow along. So I ask where will and the athletes, that's my subject, those two words, and then I have my base verb. Where will the athletes compete? Okay? I want to know the particular location, maybe the address, so that I can drive there and watch. Okay? If I want to ask a question about the time, so this could be like time on a clock, noon, 6 p.m. It could be a date. Could be a month, could be a year. It just sort of depends on the question. But I will use the question word when. And again, I'm going to follow that same structure. When will the team compete? Maybe I'm asking for a specific time or a day with this. Okay. The next type of question we have are manner questions. And we use the question word how with this. So we want to know how an action was done or in this case, will be done since it's future. And again, we're going to follow the same structure. So I use my question word how, I use will. They is my subject. I have the base verb, then compete. And then I've got some more context here, some more words to help us understand the question. How will they compete after everyone is vaccinated? So we know a lot of sports, both, or all, I should say all, youth, high school, college, professional, many of them have changed the way that they play to win, right? So now this question is asking about a future, maybe a prediction or a plan here of how are things going to change once the majority of people are vaccinated. If you want to understand the reason someone is doing or is planning to do a particular action, you should use the question word why. And again, same structure. Why will you compete against your friends? Right? Finally, we can ask a question about what. Right? This is asking for a thing, an object. Sometimes we call this a determiner. And again, same structure here. What will they compete for? Right? What is the prize? What do they gain if they win? There are two final question structures that I want to look at, but I want to note that these are different than the ones we just looked at. There's a second way to ask about a thing or an object, and it's using the question word which. But what's different here is right after which, we're going to have either a noun or non-noun phrase that sort of gives us options or notes. We're asking the person who's going to respond to our question to sort of pick between these options. So here, my example, which tennis players will compete first? So here, I'm asking to pick out of this group, pick out of the tennis team, which are going to go first. Finally, if you want to ask about the person, the subject, who will be responsible for the action, that question word who is serving as our subject. So our structure here can be a little different. Who will compete against you would be an example of this. Finally, let's take a look at some related words with our verb compete. The first word we'll look at is the noun competition. It means, or one of the ways we can use the noun, is to refer to the activity or condition of competing. So an example of this, there's a band competition this weekend. So again, competing competitions not limited to just sports, in a wide variety of activities like band. A second way to use the noun competition is to refer to the opposition, or said another way, the people or the person with whom one is competing. So an example of that, our competition today is a talented team. So I'm describing the group of people that we will be competing against. The next noun we'll take a look at is competitor. This is referring to a person or a group of people, could also be referring to an organization that is taking part either in athletic, commercial, economic, or some type of other competition. Let me give you an example of this. Coca-Cola's main competitors are Pepsi, Tropicana, and Red Bull. So in this sentence, we're kind of talking about commercial or economic competition because we're talking about a business, a company. Coca-Cola wants people to buy their products, their sodas, as does these other companies. So this is what makes them their competition. The next word we'll take a look at is the adjective competitive. This can also have a couple meanings. The first way to use it is to reference or say you're relating something or someone and connecting that to competition. We might be describing a person or a group of people who have a strong desire to be more successful than others. An example of this usage could be high school sports have become more and more competitive. So in the present day, right, there are many individuals, many teams, many parents of students who have this strong desire to win, to be more successful. And it's generally thought that competitiveness exists more today than it did, let's say, 50 years ago. A second way to use the adjective competitive is to mean as good as, or better than something of a comparable nature. Let me give you an example of that. Are the new restaurants' prices competitive? So are the prices as good as other restaurants, other businesses? Right? If they're too high, people aren't going to be interested in coming there or frequenting the restaurant because there are cheaper options. Thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.